Welcome everybody to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. I'm your host, Dead Ponic, and with me is my co-host, Queen Byron. Without her, none of this would be possible at all. Yeah.
Well, we make the world go round, right?
Yeah. So, if just good news. Our Discord server is up and going. We just need to put a few adjustments on it. We have our Dragonus Podcastus bingo card. I'm still working on the Patreon thing, but for this episode, I'm actually going to let Queen Byron take lead here, and we're going to discuss something not lore-wise, but more the overall aspect of D&D. Yeah, Byron, you want to take this one for me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it is a little bit lore-based almost, but it's more like D&D as a game lore. So we're going to talk today about the OGL, and if you have been following the news or even just kind of seen hints of it in the community and online groups or things like that, you can kind of tell that people are pretty upset. Maybe you don't know why. So let me give a short explanation. So OGL stands for Open Game License, and this is something that Wizards put in place to signal to the community and to allow the community to make third-party content, homebrew content for Dungeons & Dragons. So a little bit of historical context. The company TSR created Dungeons & Dragons, and they made the first and second editions, and they actually sued a lot of people who tried to make content for the game. They were very litigious, and they felt very strongly about protecting their brand, protecting their copyright, and protecting their intellectual property, which is like the stuff they created, right? When Wizards bought TSR, they bought the D&D brand, they made 3rd edition. And with 3rd edition, they put out what was the original Open Game License, which was a signal to the community that they weren't going to continue the practice of suing people who tried to make third-party or homebrew content, and that it was even allowed and encouraged to make content for your friends, to share online, or even to publish things professionally and to make money. Now, this whole Open Game License has been a wonderful tool that the community has used, or maybe not tool, but a reference document where you can point to it and say, yes, this company allows us to make content adjacent to their brand. You don't see that in other games so much. For example, Call of Cthulhu is done by Chaosium. They don't have an Open Game License. They don't allow people to make third-party content. They take the more litigious route in some cases. But with the Open Game License, it's been allowing the D&D brand to flourish, really. After 3rd edition came 4th, 4th edition also had not an Open Game License, but something that kind of resembled it, but it wasn't as open. And 4th edition only lasted 5 years before 2014 came 5th edition, and with it another, what you would say, more open game license, an actual Open Game License. So the Wizards of the Coast company has encouraged and allowed people to make third-party content for themselves, for their friends, or even as real publishers to make money off of. This has been in place for about 20 years now. D&D started in 2014, but the Open Game License as an idea has been around for about 20 years. There is some confusion or debates about whether the Open Game License is officially needed. It gets really complicated in, like legalities and stuff, but you can't copyright game rules or game processes. We see this a lot actually in the board game community, where two similar games will come out at very similar times, and a lot of times it's coincidence, but sometimes it's not. But the only things you can really copyright or trademark are, whole new creations. So like Wizards has some spells, some monsters, things like that they've created, and those things belong to them, right? So those are their copyrights, those are their trademarks. Now, as recently as actually starting in kind of November, December of 2022, there was talk of a new gaming license coming with the new edition of 1D&D, which is scheduled to be released in 2024. There's been a lot of rumors and conjecture and kind of like leaks coming out from supposed Wizard employees who wanted to remain anonymous, or industry insiders and people like that. First, there was talk that there wasn't going to be an open gaming license for one D&D, which was a little surprising because, again, we've had this kind of idea of third-party content for about 20 years now. Then, in January, a leaked document of the new version of OGL was released, and it was proven to be credible. And within that new OGL were things like royalty structures. So that meant that if your company made over $750,000 in 1 year, you had to pay Wizards 25% of your profits, or of your revenue, not just your profits. So even before you've paid yourself or your artists or your writers or, the book publisher or whomever, you had to give Wizards 25% of your revenue. If you look at popular Kickstarters, like Matt Colville's publishing company, they had a successful Kickstarter that raised about $2 million, but he did a cost breakdown, and he said that basically our company only really made about $200,000 after all was said and done, because, again, they pay their writers, they pay their artists, they pay the people who work in the company. And after all was said and done, if they had had to pay Wizards 25%, they would have lost money on their Kickstarter. And another part of the OGL that people were really upset about was this kind of back license kind of a thing, where it basically said, if you print something or publish something for 5th edition, or for 6th edition, right, because the OGL would be for the new edition, if you printed something, then we also have the rights to print it without crediting you, without giving you any money, in any country, at any time. So if I made a supplement that maybe was about flowers or, expanding on herbology or something like that, Wizards could then take that, print it in one of their books, and I'd never see a dime. And then, of course, nobody would buy my product specifically because Wizards had the exact same thing. And, of course, you support the official version of things, right? So these were some of the two biggest problems that people were having with the leaked document. And then over the course of several days, people were getting more and more upset that Wizards wasn't making any announcements or refuting the leak. So obviously it was like a real credible thing because they weren't trying to dispute it. They weren't saying, well, this was false or whatever. But then people started, there was this kind of fan-led campaign called D&D Be Gone. And as kind of a way to show Wizards that we're unhappy with the new changes or the proposed changes, and we want our voices to be heard. You kind of have to hit them where it hurts, and Wizards is a big company, so they talk in dollars, right? So people were saying to cancel their D&D Beyond subscriptions, D&D Beyond being an online tool to look at books and create characters on there. People were canceling their subscriptions. People were also canceling their whole accounts, which is kind of a lengthy process on D&D Beyond. They don't really have a great automated system for it. So their support team was bogged down. They were, seeing the fan outrage and seeing the conversation that was going on. And then eventually, last Friday, they did release a statement, finally, saying that they heard the fan outrage, they heard the community backlash, and they wanted to assure us that it was just a draft and that no changes had been made or finalized, and that they wanted to continue a spirit of open communication and, collaboration moving forward, and that a new OGL for the new system would be coming eventually. However, this statement was met with a lot of skepticism because it didn't really, it didn't really apologize to the community at large for the damage that they had done, because with the royalty structure that they had proposed, they would have put dozens of companies out of business, basically. And they used this language where they were calling these companies large companies or competitors. Wizards of the Coast made over $1 billion in 2021. $1 billion with a B. The next largest company is Paizo, and they make a couple million. So that's like a drop in the ocean, right? It's not comparable, right? You're comparing an apple to a planet. They're not even on the same scale. Wizards is the only large corporation in this space. So that was really upsetting to the community. And in in the apology statement, they were saying that they never intended for the OGL to fund their own competitors. Well, again, they don't really have any competitors. They own a large majority of the market share. Almost all RPG books sold today are of 5th edition, and it's not even close, right? And there are lots of companies who basically have only 2, 3, 4 workers publishing, printing, drawing up their own art in-house and all that stuff. The royalty structure would have just been a death sentence to them. They mentioned NFTs several times, that they were trying to kind of protect their brand from NFTs, blockchain, and stuff like that. While at the same time, Hasbro has actually minted several NFTs of other properties they own. I think Transformers and Power Rangers, maybe. They also talked about how they want to protect D&D and the community from bigoted content, homophobia, racism, and stuff like that, which could be considered a valid concern. However, just last year, Wizards had to retract some information and issue an apology because, again, they printed something that was racist. And so their statement just rang so hollow. It didn't seem very true. And at the same time, it was just a PR statement. No new legal documents have been released. So we're not sure still on the current state of the original open gaming license. Is it going to be, it needs to be perpetual and irrevocable. So currently in the document it says perpetual, which you think would mean it goes on forever. But really it means that it goes on until something is changed or until they revoke it. So it is revocable. It can be removed, and the original open game license that everyone's used for 20 years would be, gone and not be, able to be used anymore. So as a community, we're asking Wizards to ensure the future of the current open gaming license as irrevocable and perpetual, so that no one has to worry if they're eventually going to be sued, again, for printing material related to 5th edition. And we want to make sure that any future open gaming licenses don't contain royalty structures or fees of any kind. Again, just because they said they revoked the royalty structure, but that doesn't mean there won't be some other kind of payments or something that Wizards requires, which, again, is laughable because they are the giant in this industry. If they want to make more money, they need to print new things. They can't squeeze it out of small creators. And again, almost everyone else in the space is like a small creator. Like, Paizo is the second biggest, and like I said, they only make a couple million every year or so. And that's revenue, right? So that's still, they have to pay their publishers, pay their artists, pay their writers, and all that good stuff. They need to make sure that the open gaming license is an actual open thing. So there's been a lot of goodwill lost to Wizards of the Coast. Really, they're just acting like the giant corporation they are, but it's surprising and shocking because we've built this community up as creators, videographers, podcasters, all the people who make D&D kind of related content have made D&D what it is today. And now it feels like they're trying to punish us for it, almost. So there's been people who've been talking about making their own RPG system. People are moving away from Wizards of the Coast as a company. They're playing D&D less. We're kind of seeing all of these things happen as a result of the leaked documents and all the PR that's been going on. And, we just wish Wizards would do better.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've heard a lot of people have been going over to Pathfinder too. Is Pathfinder part of Wizards of the Coast or no?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay.
No, so Pathfinder is printed by Paizo.
Ah, okay.
And it's kind of funny because Pathfinder and Paizo were started right around 4th edition times. So when 3.5 was officially ended, Paizo was started. That's a publishing company, and they made Pathfinder. Pathfinder is very similar to Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. Or Pathfinder First Edition was similar, and now they're publishing Pathfinder Second Edition, which is really its own thing. But if you're looking for a high fantasy RPG with lots of numbers, Pathfinder has tons of choices. It can be sometimes intimidating to new players. It's not really a rules light system. It's what you would call crunchy. There's a lot of things to look at. But I played Pathfinder and I loved it. If you're looking for a fantasy RPG that's more interesting than Dungeons and Dragons, it's got more things going on, then, Pathfinder might be what you choose. There's dozens of great RPGs out there, and if you're listening to this and you're considering switching or maybe moving away from Dungeons and Dragons, you might look at Pathfinder. You might look at Dungeon Crawl Classics if you like something a little more old school. Then you have games like the Cypher System, which is more science fantasy, and then there's Forbidden Lands, which is one of my favorites, which is kind of like an old school revival type of game. Uh, there's just so many other RPGs out there. So as much as I've loved Dungeons and Dragons over the years, I'm upset with Wizards for having done all this these shenanigans. I hope that people will take the opportunity to explore new games and maybe find something that they like even more. Dungeons and Dragons has just been, like I said, kind of the giant in this space, but there are so many other wonderful games to play. I hope people will try new ones.
Yeah, and if I could just say something to Wizards, if they are just having to listen to this, it's not that we're not trying to boycott or anything, but we're trying to make our voices heard and say, hey, this is what we
Hmm.
think, and we want something. We want you guys to cut the shenanigans out, please. People have to.
Yeah,
People,
absolutely.
yeah, people have to make a living. I mean, you guys are like $1 billion corporation, so you guys don't need like
Hmm.
you don't need more money. You get enough money from the stuff you already publish. Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of what some other like
Right,
companies
and
are.
if they wanted to make more money, if they wanted to make more money, then they could do other things to do that. They could create like class-specific character sheets or a different style of character sheets. They could do more supplements or books and things like that. Maybe they make special folders or DM screens. I mean, the the ideas are endless. They just felt like they just went straight for the third-party content creators.
I had a crazy idea for how they could resolve this issue. Like what you said. Like if like say they want to you publish something and they want to publish that same thing. um they could get like maybe they could partner with you or something, or they could like pay you to like um pay
Mhm.
you like a percentage to publish the thing, and and a percentage of the sales that they make from publishing it that goes towards you, rather than they keep all the money, you don't get a dime, kind of thing. That's what I think anyway. I think that would be a good idea. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of options, but it felt like, yeah, it felt like they went straight for the nuclear option rather than trying to find some middle ground.
I feel like this is going to be like an Order 66 situation here, if you get what I'm talking about, where the D&D community is going to have to go into hiding, and then they're going to have to rise up and kind of
Uh-huh.
like stoke the fires of rebellion, and then Wizards is going to realize, oh, we're the we're kind of the bad guys here. We need to kind of, you know, reallocate ourselves. I this is a
Well,
good.
I would say the resistance has already started.
Yes. Yes, very much so. And hopefully this episode will kind of, and there's been other like D&D podcasters and YouTubers that have been voicing their opinions. Like I watch a show called The Dungeon Dudes. They've been voicing their opinions, and I love their content. And I'm glad that other D&D
Mhm.
podcasters are doing this. I don't know if Matt Mercer is doing anything or voicing his opinion on this, but since he's like
Oh,
sorry.
well, I can speak to that. So, no, it's fine. The Critical Role team put out a statement, and at first glance, it seems very generic. Like, we stand with the D&D community and content creators. It wasn't as scathing or as bold as some of the other statements have been. However, it's very likely that the Critical Role team are under contract and that they have signed either non-disclosure agreements or non-disparaging agreements, which means that they can't actually say bad things about Wizards of the Coast or D&D Beyond without being sued. And D&D Beyond is one of their show sponsors. So the statement they released was very kind of bland and generic, but if you read between the lines a little bit, it does sound like they are on the side of content creators and third-party publishers more so than Wizards.
Yes.
It's just that they can't actually say that out loud, right?
Yeah. So they're directly, indirectly supporting our community. So that's good. And I haven't watched any of the streams or any of Critical Role's like sessions, but I know of them, and I'm glad that they're with us, but they're not with us. So, and the best thing, I think the best thing we can do is just pray and hope that Wizards is listening to our voices, and hopefully they put out something where they're not gonna put us in the hole. They're not gonna throw us into a pit, and we're gonna have to climb our way back out. Yeah. So thank you, Byron, for educating us. I certainly learned quite a bit about this.
Well, unfortunately, yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. Go ahead with your statement.
Well, I was just going to say, unfortunately, I feel like the damage is done. I know Wizards is kind of hoping. Well, this is conjecture, but Wizards is probably hoping that we will just kind of forget about this whole OGL nonsense and go back to playing 5th edition and then eventually adopt the new edition when it comes out. I know there will definitely be some people who this news never reached them and they don't really care about what happens, on the corporate side of things. They just want to play, and that's perfectly fine, but a lot of the damage is done. People are moving away from Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons, like, permanently, like, for good. So we'll just have to see what the future of the hobby looks like.
Hopefully, yes. I will still stick with D&D, but if worst comes to worst, I may consider switching over to Pathfinder, because my work can work in Pathfinder. It's just there's going to be a bunch of, as you said, number crunching. Yeah. So before we wrap up, I just want to say, our podcast is we're not taking in any profit. We do this for fun, and hopefully this is not to slander or talk bad about Wizards in any capacity, but I just want to say that our voice hopefully is heard along with the other members of our joyous community. And I hope that as one big, happy family, one big happy community, we can come together and just maybe we can get to like have some people represent us and like go see Wizards and say, hey, this is what we think. We want to meet. We either want something to happen or we want to compromise. And I'm hoping that Wizards is willing to compromise, and maybe hopefully things will be looking bright in the future. But until then, as you said, the damage has been done. So yeah, I don't know what the future holds, but all we have to do is what was that quote again from Gandalf? All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. So I think the best thing to do right now is just to make our voices heard, but not, like slander Wizards, because they are a good company. They're the reason that our community exists. Well, part of the reason anyway. Without them, basically D&D would have kind of died out, unfortunately. But for me, I'm just glad that this game exists, and I'm hoping for the best. And if you guys like if you guys are in groups, D&D groups, discuss this among yourselves. Make your voices heard. Hell, well, obviously don't talk smack about Wizards, but make your voices heard on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, all that good stuff. It's important. Wizards sees this stuff, and they most likely will respond. And that's what we need right now. So, any closing statements before we wrap up?
Just remember that there's other RPGs out there. If you want to continue to play Dungeons & Dragons, there's nothing wrong with that. But I encourage everyone to look around the RPG scene. Maybe you'll find something that you like even better.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't Wizards also do like the Star Wars role-playing game too? I think that's what they do.
No. The only game that they have is Dungeons & Dragons.
Oh, okay, okay. Alright, so, take care, guys. We will see you next time. Next week is gonna be a regular lore video, and then the week after that, we're gonna do another role-playing session. Stay tuned for that. And as for, well, since I'm talking about this, stay tuned on the channel as well, because I've got a special project coming out, and if you've seen the preview video, you know what it is, but it is currently in the process of being edited, so stay tuned for that, and hopefully I'll get that rendered. But anyway, take care, and we'll see you guys next time.